On the 1st of February 2018. The title of our production today is Memo to Watergate. We return to the 70s in 2018. Very interesting situation. Brought to you by WBRN Radio in Boston on the Boston Red Network. Nonetheless, this is an interesting episode, a little bit of background to Watergate for some of us that were around. The three major networks, NBC, ABC, and CBS, were the ones that did the broadcasting. The Washington Post was the head newspaper, more or less, although information came out of the New York Times at the time. From the Watergate episode and various actors. What we're seeing today, although a lot of information is coming out of the Washington Post, the network situation is totally different. There are many actors out there on the TV side, and of course on the radio side. We not only have the right-wing talk hosts in every major market, whichever market you want to name, they are there. But you also have internet radio, which we're on, and that there are thousands of people in it that call themselves internet broadcasters. Some call themselves podcasters. Some just call themselves whatever. But nonetheless, there are all kinds of political opinions out there. And for the most part, various broadcasters are either piggybacking off of the Washington Post articles, or articles from the New York Times, which we'll talk about here. And we have, of course, new as is Memo. And what it basically appears to be from the FBI statement, it's a hodgepodge of events put together, and Mr. Nunez is the editor-in-chief of it. So what you can do if you are dealing in this particular case with some classified information, and there's a thin line nowadays from what is declassified and what is classified. If you recall the events surrounding Hillary the Monster Clinton, that the monster was accused of trafficking in classified information on her private quote-unquote server, which was nonsense. But if you notice, this whole paradigm has changed from trafficking in classified information that applied to Hillary the Monster Clinton, that is applied to Nunez. Now, a statement came out from the FBI itself saying that this would cause problems with sources. And we're talking about Carter Page, I believe, is the person involved in this, one of many White House officials involved in various kinds of quote-unquote shady activities. Now, recently today, and we'll get more to it, the head of the Center for Disease in Atlanta, Georgia, Fitzgerald, was forced to resign for having interests that conflicted with her job. She'd invested in, of all things, tobacco companies. Now, you can understand, she used to be even the Georgia Health Commissioner, and at that time she had some sort of public-private partnership of the types we have criticized, whether it be on the Republican side or the so-called Democratic side. These things are just festering with corruption. Anyway, she was with Coca-Cola, and you can understand Coca-Cola and their quote-unquote sugary drinks. They do have water, and they have various other kinds of drinks out there now, many different kind of drinks. But still, their name stay is quote-unquote Coca-Cola. You'll see that at the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, 86, 87-year-old Warren Buffett will be there drinking Coke. And Charlie Munger, who is in his 90s, will be drinking Diet Coke. Now, Diet Coke or Diet anything is very harmful to you. It hadn't harmed Charlie Munger. He's still moving on. But nonetheless, that kind of partnership, and then going, of course, into the disease control mechanism buying tobacco stalks when it's recognized by everyone out there that smoking in itself is not a, as they say, a healthy issue, that it causes many, many problems, and particularly as it is advertised to the working class and to oppressed national minorities, i.e. African Americans, Latinos, and to a certain extent Asians. And we see this out there every day. So she invested in those stocks not only in the past, but evidently some while she was in office. So she had to go. A new director of health education there, I think it's still called that. But anyway, he used to be the counsel, Attar, I think is his name, Azar. Anyway, Mr. Azar, A-Z-A-R, decided to clean house, told her she had to go, because basically she had to recuse herself from many functions, testifying before Congress, so-called rulemaking, etc., in the opioid situation, because she was invested in many, many different things. So in other words, she was a vested interest operator. Pierce, who used to be, his name Pierce Price, whatever his name was, used to be in charge of health and education, used to be health, education, and welfare. Anyway, nonetheless, he had to go because of his flying on private jets at public expense. So this is where we tie this into this memo to Watergate, that you had similar situations going on back in the 70s. It was a little bit different in that you had this master burglary, which was a criminal activity, and then it was covered up. But here you have various actors that are engaged in business activities, literally. And some of these Trump functionaries in the campaign and before he took office were engaged in various business activities with people in the Russian Federation. And there's a history that DJ Trump's empire, and again, he has many, many lines of business. Many of them he would probably not know what's going on in them, but again, the Trump hotels, etc., had investors worldwide, whether they be in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, or the Russian Federation. There's no doubt about that. But what they are focusing on now is the 2016 election. Our take on that election is that, yes, there was interference, but there also was interference in elections in the Russian Federation, elections in Ukraine that brought in a fascistic government there, and so forth and so on, even to Poland, who now wants to rewrite their Nazi history by saying that, Lord, literally, that you can't say that the Poles were behind the death camps, and they were. The Germans were occupying, but there were Poles that went along with it, and the history says that, and still today, the parties that are involved there are these right-of-center parties. Now, that you did not have as pronounced in the Watergate era. Yes, the Republican Party was right-of-center. Yes, Tricky Dick used a Southern strategy, which is a racist strategy. Yes, he used the N-word, but using the N-word is one thing, but turning the whole country into N-I-G-G-E-R is a different sort of situation. And that is what is happening now through these breaches in public trust. People that hang around places like Davos and hang around these NGOs that go out preaching to the world, particularly in the area of emerging nations in Africa, about transparency, getting rid of corruption, etc. And of course, that obviously is what the good government people here, if you go back to the Mugrakers and those people there, St. Clair Lewis, etc., on the packing house industries and various other things, trying to clean up corruption. But it is your definition of corruption. Now, yes, you had machines in places like Chicago, Crump down in New Orleans, etc. But those were political machines, a little bit different situations, that elected politicians. Yes, the politicians, some of them were crooked, but at the same time, they did provide services to the people. Well, what we're talking about here, the differentiation in this particular scheme and what happened in Watergate. They had a cover up there to subvert the election. They were going to steal evidence from the psychologist's office there and see what they could make of it. Basically the same kind of information that Trump Jr. and company were involved in, trying to get information out of people in the Russian Federation to use to their advantage in the campaign, just sort of like Ellsberg's psychiatric records. But this was a kind of downgrade talking points as far as what we have now. It's an ever widening situation, and to come out with a memo of things with no supporting documents, because anytime you're dealing in classified information and rewriting some of it, you will never get to the essence of it. And that is what Schaff and the FBI are basically saying. They said will harm quote-unquote national security, which is a broad term. I don't necessarily buy all that, but the problem here is that if you're going to use this as a basis to have a 2018 Saturday night massacre, whether it be Saturday night or Monday morning, of some of these officials there at the FBI, perhaps officials there, Mr. Mueller and his operation, to fire Mueller, well, you fire Mueller. But if you fire the assistant director of the FBI or Wary, the director of the FBI, you have fired them for political reasons. That becomes clear to anyone. It's schoolboy simple. Let's go to this article. This is by Ms. Herberman. Let me just find the article here. A very nice article out of the New York Times. See if we can find it here. Here we go. Mueller zeroes in on story puts together about Trump Tower meeting. This is by Joe Becker and Maggie Herberman, and there's 2 or 3 other people there. We won't go into their names, but anyway, it's a nice picture of DJ Trump aboard Air Force One on a flight from Europe last July. President Trump and his advisors race to cobble together a news release about a mysterious meeting at Trump Tower the previous summer between Russians and top campaign officials. Rather than acknowledge the meeting's intended purpose to obtain the political dirt about Hillary Rodham Clinton, the statement instead described the meeting as being an obscure Russian adoption program. Oh boy. The statement released in response to questions from the New York Times about the meeting has become a focus of inquiry by the special counsel, Mr. Mueller, investigating the Russian interference. Prosecutors working with Mr. Mueller in recent months have questioned numerous White House officials about how the release came together and about the direction. This is very similar to what's happening now with Nuaz and company. Trump oversees the process. Mr. Mueller's team recently notified Mr. Trump's lawyers that the Air Force One statement is one of about a dozen subjects that the prosecutor wants to discuss face-to-face with ODJ himself. The revelation of the meeting was striking. It placed the president's son and top campaign officials in direct contact with a Russian lawyer who promised damage information or goods on Hillary Clinton. An email to the president's son emerged saying that the information was part of a Russian effort to help the Trump campaign. We've had this in the past. I recall in the Obama campaign they accused China of financial aid. In itself, that's nothing new. Some lawyers and witnesses who have sat in have been briefed on the interview have puzzled over Mr. Mueller's interest in the episode, lying to federal investigators, of course, as a crime. And this is one of the situations in criminal law that you encounter representing people in federal cases. Lying to the FBI has got more people into criminality than anything else, and conspiracy. It had a conspiracy. Well, I won't get into that, but anyway, making false statements to the FBI, that's a bargain chip, because they can come back and say, okay, you made this statement, it's false, and what else can you give us? Well, if you know anything, you are going to tell the FBI. Of course, the FBI has to collaborate with what you say. For that reason, some of Trump's advisors argue that Mueller has no grounds to ask the president about statements and say that he should refuse to discuss it. Well, again, that's the president's option. What is really clear, and you have to understand now, there's a lot of editorializing here. Aside from family members tied together over 48 hours to manage one of the more consequential crises of the young administration, the situation quickly degenerated into something of a circular firing squad. They protected their own interests and shifted blame and potentially left themselves and the president legally vulnerable. Well, not unusual there. And a nice picture of Hope Hicks that evidently Trump one day told, who was it, Corey, what's his name, that she was a nice piece, and I'll clean this up a little bit. The latest version to be called from the interview about the episode is Mark Corallo, who served as a spokesman for Trump's legal team before resigning in July. Corallo received an interview request last week from the special prosecutor and has agreed to the interview, according to people that know it. And this is a little different also. In the Watergate episode, you had these little revelations coming out, but not at the speed of today. Corallo is planning to tell Mueller about a previous undisclosed conference call with DJ Trump, and here comes Hope Hicks and the whole thing. The White House communication director, according to 3 people. Mr. Corallo plans to tell investigators that Ms. Hicks said during the call that emails written by DJ Trump Jr. before the Trump Tower meeting, in which the younger Trump said he was eager to receive political dirt about Clinton from the Russians, will never get out. That left Corallo with concerns that Ms. Hicks could be contemplating obstructing justice. Ouch. In a statement on Wednesday, a lawyer for Ms. Hicks strongly denied the allegation by Corallo. As most reporters know, it's not my practice to comment in response to questions from the media, but this warrants a response, said the lawyer, Mr. Trott. She never said that, and the idea that Hope Hicks ever suggested that an email or other documents could be concealed or destroyed is completely false. Competing statements on the morning of Friday, July 2nd, reporters from the Times approached White House officials and lawyers with questions about the Trump Tower meeting a year earlier. Reporters said the Times was preparing a story revealing the meeting with the Russians had taken place and asked the White House for more information on its purpose. The President and senior White House officials were in Germany for the G20, which we covered, asked for more time to respond, citing time differences, conflicting schedules, etc. They scheduled a conference call with the reporters for early the next morning. The call never happened, so the Times reporters submitted a list of 14 questions about the meeting to the White House and to the lawyers of the Trump campaign aides who attended the meeting. Amongst the questions, what was discussed, what did the attendees think was going to be discussed. Interesting question there. Trump's aides received the list midnight on Air Force One, the official aircraft now of DJ Trump, on the way back from the summit, and began writing responses in the plane's front cabin. Trump humbled with Hicks. He's always close to her. During the meeting, according to people familiar with the episode, Ms. Hicks was sending frequent text messages to Junior, who was in New York, and Alan Garten, a lawyer for young Trump, who was in New York and was messaging with the White House advisors. See, we didn't, in the Watergate, well, first of all, we didn't have text messaging, we didn't have smartphones, we didn't even have desktop computers. So in other words, this is totally different. You're leaving all kinds of record trails. And the problem with texting these messages out, those texts end up in log files somewhere in the sky. So in other words, there's third-party authentication here, and they'd better watch out, because some of those messages are around and have been around. And of course, with all the hackers out there these days, they could have hacked in to these cloud backup systems or whatever and recovered these communications. So in other words, it could be collaborated. What happens if you have communications that are not legally sought? Now, I mean, we're not talking about the FBI. They could have got a subpoena to access this information, or NSA or any of these intelligence organizations could have subpoenas or just willy-nilly get it. And you have these things there. If they are legally obtained, you can use them in court. If they're illegally obtained, they could be used as backgrounder. Now, his personal lawyer, this is Mark Kosowitz, was not included in the discussion. Very smart on Mr. Kosowitz there. The president, the supervisor, the writing, according to three people familiar with the episode, with input from other White House aides. A fierce debate erupted on how much information to release. Trump was insistent about including language at the meeting with the Russian adoptions, according to two people with the knowledge of discussion. By early afternoon, the Times received a separate statement from Jamie S. Gulick, I suppose, a lawyer at the time for Jared Kushner. That was son-in-law of the president. The statement said little about the meeting, except that Mr. Kushner had briefly attended at the request of his brother-in-law, Junior. And nearly all the questions were left unanswered, seemed to put the onus on Junior. Nearly 4 hours later, the statement that had been cobbled together aboard Air Force One was sent to the Times. The statement was in Junior's name, or under his name, and was issued by Garten. In short introductory, it read, I asked Jared and Paul to stop by. We primarily discussed the program about the adoption of Russian children, who was active and popular with American families years ago, and since the ended by the Russian government, a smart idea there. It was not a campaign issue at the time, and there was no follow-up. According to four people familiar with discussion, Junior had insisted that the word primarily be included in the statement. The Times published its story about the meeting with the statement at 5 p.m. Not long after that, the news site Circa published a different version, saying that the June 2016 meeting had been set up to discuss a Russian policy. Corallo, the spokesman for the legal team, said that the story that the Russians had misrepresented who they were and who they worked for. He, along with the rest of the president's legal team, was not consulted by Junior's statement before it was released. He suggested that the meeting might have been set up by Democratic operatives connecting one of the Russians in the meeting. This is Vatasha V. I won't get done. To the research firm that helped produce and unverified dossier that contained salacious allegations about Trump's connections to Russia. Now, I don't know about the Circa thing. We'll look at it in a minute here, and we'll move on. White House uneasy. The dueling statements, both which were withheld. The true purpose of the meeting created tension at the White House. Now, accusations were flying that the botched response made already bad situation worse. Hicks called Corallo, according to 3 people. Now, one of the problems in these situations in Watergate, you basically had so-called deep throat. It was a centralized person giving out information. But here you have many, many people, and it's almost given out in real time. She accused him of this. She accused Corallo of trafficking in conspiracy theories and drawing more attention to the story. The conference call with the president, Mr. Corallo, and Ms. Hicks took place the next morning, and what transpired on the call is a matter of dispute. Corallo's account, which he provided contemporaneously to 3 colleagues, who later gave it to the Times. He told both Mr. Trump and Ms. Hicks that the statement drafted aboard Air Force One would backfire because the documents would eventually surface, showing the meeting had been set up by the Trump campaign to get the dirt, so to speak. Here's a picture of old Trump Jr. here. And according to his account, Hicks responded that the emails will never get out because only a few people had access to them. Corallo, who worked as the Justice Department spokesman during the administration of G.W. Bush, told colleagues he was alarmed not only by what Hicks had said. Either Hicks was being naive or suggesting that the emails could be withheld from the investigation. Oh, boy. Contacted on Wednesday, Corallo said he did not dispute any of the accounts shared by his colleagues, but declined to elaborate further because he's going to see the special counsel. Even if Corallo is correct, Ms. Hicks was hinting at an attempt to conceal the emails. Doing so would have been nearly impossible. Congress had requested records from Paul Manafort, and the Trump campaign chair, Mr. Kirshner, and other campaign about the Russian meeting. When the president began questioning Corallo about the nature of the documents, Corallo cut off the conversation, urged the president to continue discussions with his lawyers. Corallo told colleagues that he immediately notified the legal team of the conversation and jotted down notes to memorize. He also shared those concerns with the infamous Steve Bannon, then the chief strategist. Corallo left the job shortly after the phone call. The recent book, Fire and Fury Inside the Trump Administration, Michael Wolff, which was met with anger, denunciations by the president, linked Corallo's resignation to concerns that he had about obstruction, but provided no details. Well, you're going to hear more of that later. In the days that followed, the Air Force One statement at Times revealed that the true purpose of the June 2010 meeting was to obtain the damaged goods on Hillary Monster Clinton. The younger Trump ultimately released the emails after being told the Times was about to publish them. Oh, boy. So that's the end of that. And from Circa, this is all on here. He just gathers members of the campaign for meeting with a Russian lawyer before the election. This was published, incidentally, on July the 8th, 2017, shortly before his father was formally nominated. Junior was approached by a Russian lawyer. We know that story there. And the eldest son briefly gathered others for the meeting, including his brother-in-law Kirshner, the campaign manager Paul Manafort, which Trump was not aware of the meeting and did not attend it, according to the lawyers. A translator and an American businessman who worked for the pro-Russian business lobby also attended and lasted for 20 minutes. We learned that both of our own investigation public reports that the participants in the meeting misrepresented who they were and who they worked for. That's according to Mark Corallo, spokesman for Trump. Specifically, we learned that the person who sought the meeting was associated with Fusion GPS. Now, Fusion GPS wrote the dossier the Steele dossier. These developments raise serious issues as to exactly who authorized and participated in an effort by Russian nationals to influence the election. This is for Corallo. This Vasesny Yakshaya is identified as a former Russian prosecutor, private attorney. She's been in this before, representing the Russian businessman Denis Kassev. And against, anyway, she is a Russian lawyer. The Justice Department alleges, let's see, what's the name of this firm here? Well, we'll skip over them. Privazone received money for laundering scheme in Russia that was uncovered by over Russian authorities. Anyway, but in 2012, the U.S. Congress passed and signed a law in his honor, known as the Maskansky Act, which punished Russian officials alleged responsibility for the lawyer's death. Oh, well, anyway. Whatever. And, let's see, Grassley asked the Justice Department to look at all connections and seek documents from Fusion GPS on whether opponents of Trump funded the creation of a salacious dossier there. The FBI said it was unable to collaborate any of the allegations in the dossier that involved Trump. So this is a battle brewing, and Grassley is from Iowa, acting anyway. McCabe has since resigned. This was some backward history of this, so a little different type of situation. Let me just check out time here. Roaming a little bit on this. Anyway, we're kind of running over time. I'll throw this in. This is just some of the things that's happening here in this post-Watergate. A Florida congressman invites a notorious alt-right troll to the State of the Union speak. Gratz, his name, I think Gaetz, Gratz. Right-winger there invited some guy named Chuck Jones, an alt-right troll they're calling, who was banned from Twitter, accused of being a Holocaust denier and a white supremacist. Anyway, he invites this guy. This guy is also a libertarian. They have similar libertarian views on cryptocurrency and marijuana. And one of the things to note here is a lot of these right-wingers are in the mode of Ayn Rand 2.0 in updating Ayn Rand, a notorious crack addict. But they have these libertarian, very right-wing, individualistic views, a perversion of much of the political philosophy literature written there, but it is an evolving process. So in other words, evolved from Hobbes and so forth and so on to what we have today. So today you have cryptocurrencies. That's a way of liberating themselves from the treasuries of various nations, I assume. And I don't know what Canvas. Canvas is more of a decorative type thing. Many of us with normal support legalization of cannabis and other drugs. But the point there is it is a libertarian thing. They throw this in to their philosophical thing. Is Johnson's 29, Gratz, however you pronounce his name, is 35, and he was a guest. But just the very idea of having a white supremacist as a guest at a State of the Union is outrageous. Is definitely outrageous, and we have to look at this, and this is why we are reporting it here as one of the outrageous activities. Where does all of this go? Well, it'll be a tremendous fight. You have the FBI, the Department of Justice, the structure of it and the leadership of it at present time, fighting back against this. And at the same time, you have a number of Republicans skipping out, so to speak. Who was it? A Republican, his name right now, but anyway, Gowdy. I think he's in South Carolina. He's not running for re-election. So what you're having is an increasing number of Republicans that are not running for re-election. Do they sense that the O.J. Victor train is rolling in to the D.C. Union Station? Well, the problem with cumulative things, many times, as in a Watergate, we don't know the full extent of the damage. Now, I think the key to this, will it go beyond this Russian thing, which we see as, from this mic, as an annoyance, to other kinds of things, such as just public corruption. There was a write-up on Uncle Ben Carlson. Uncle evidently has Carlson Jr. involved, who is a entrepreneur, hedge fund, or maybe he's an investor type in Baltimore, doing walking tours and, of course, getting business. Well, he's not a poor man; he's a millionaire too. And along with Daddy, well, you see an increase in this. Back in Watergate, yeah, you had bribing the air out of Maryland with Spiro Agnew was a crook. He'd been a governor of Maryland and had to resign. But you didn't see the level of corruption that you see here. And a little bit different. These characters not necessarily taking bribes in the traditional way, but they're interwound with various capitalist enterprises, such as Fitzgerald was there at the Center for Disease Control, that are like bribes, and we don't know how she got the stock options and stock, etc. Did she get any, as they say, favorable pricing? We don't know on that one, but nonetheless, she's in the position to influence the price of the stock of these various things she'd invest in. So we see more and more of that. I think we'll leave it here, and on Friday Jobber we'll get to a very nice article here about Joe Kennedy and Falls River values from one of our favorite quote-unquote liberal types, E.J. Dion, who grew up in Falls Church, Mass. And nonetheless, to the NBA scores now. The Grizzlies were at the Pacers 105-101. The Lakers were at the Magic 127-105 for the Lakers. The Hornets were at the Hawks in Atlanta, Hornets 123-110. The 76ers were in New York, Nets 116-108. The Heat was in Cleveland, and I guess LeBron put it on. He's thinking about going to be a Warrior. 91-89 Cavs. The Knicks were in Boston, Celtics 103-73. I guess it was a cold night for the Knicks. Definitely. The Bulls were out in Oregon, Trailblazers 124-108. And finally, the Mavericks were in Phoenix, where it's nice and warm. 102-88 was the score of there. On to college round ball. Louisville, number 2, Virginia 74-64. Maryland and Purdue 75-67 is number 3 over Maryland. Penn State, number 5, Michigan State 76-78. Houston and number 8, Cincinnati 80-70 Cincy. Arizona, number 9 in Washington State, and even 100 for Arizona, 72 for Washington State. They were not in the ball game. And in overtime, Texas and Texas Tech Red Rangers 73-71, close game that, 2 points. And number 15, West Virginia and Iowa State, a basketball power, and has been 93-77, no doubt there. LSU and number 18, Tennessee, 84-60 for LSU. There, on to the NHL. The Islanders were at the Maple Leafs, and of course they were shut out by the Maple Leafs, 5-0. The Sharks and Red Wings 2-1 in that contest. And finally, the Flyers and Capitals in Washington. Capitals 5-3 over the Flyers of Philadelphia. And this will do it for us. We'll see you on Friday Jobber. And we also have the Week That Was. We have special programming on BR on the World. That was the appearance of DJ Trump at the World Economic Forum. I think it was America First at the World Economic Forum was the title there. And we also have an open source report from last week. We talk about various things there, including security, the newest thing, ATMs. We looked at ATMs and where they are in the scheme of things. And we also, the latest update on the chips from AMD, Intel, etc. Patching process going with it. And some of the latest Linux distributions out there. And hopefully we'll get another open source report up this weekend. Part of where we're going. Good day.